little bit about that, about networking and conducting things and, you know, making the interview more of a conversation. So I'm really happy to be here and I hope I can answer a lot of your questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Deborah. So let's really get first, I guess, as a show of hands, does who has been on an interview since COVID has started? Okay, cool. All right, that's a good amount. Great, Zaina, I don't know if that counts. You got the you got the gig. Okay, cool. That's good because we also know that the in-person interview looks a little different from the virtual interview. So I want to hear from you all a little later about what that virtual interview experience was like, or if it was in person, how was it to risk your life? So we'll get into that. So diving right into things is before the interview, right? This is the part where you've applied for the job, and we talked about this in our resume workshop for those who were there. But you've applied for the job, and the company says, "Great, we find your resume to be a great asset, and shows about who you are and what skills you have. We want to know a little more." So generally, when you're getting ready and preparing for the interview, you want to research the company and know the mission and position you're applying for. And I know this seems sort of general, and some of us might think, yeah, that of course. But I think it's important to know the language in which that company is using so that you can incorporate it into the answers and stories that you share throughout your interview. So I think being very intentional on how you're consuming the language that the company is using is very important, because then also you can begin to tailor that and really incorporate it into a lot of what you're saying to the company, and those are buzzwords for them, right? So they say, oh, you know this, oh, you know that. So it shows that one, you've done your research, but also, oh, she's knowledgeable about what we're doing. So the amount of training that we might have to do for that person won't be a lot. Second is you want to know the company's culture and dress accordingly. This is true for in-person and virtual. I know in the music industry, it tends to be pretty relaxed. We even at Music Forward, when I first interviewed, I asked what the dress code was, and they were like rock star chic, and I had no idea what that had meant. And also, just so you all like know me a little better, like I used to do straight sort of casual dress for the first 2 years that I had this job. One, it was my style, and Zara was on sale every weekend. But also, it's because it's who I wanted to emulate as a person. And then as I further got into the industry, I realized that nobody was dressed business casual, and I had to switch it up to fit in. But I say all that to summarize that until you are a part of that company, that is when you adopt the sort of their dress code. So even I was told, oh, rockstar chic. In my mind, I know interview is business casual. So until I get that job, that's when I'll switch up. Deborah, did you have anything you want to add on to that note?
Oh, I think that's just a great point. I mean, you want to be the brand. I mean, you know, you want to walk in that you embody the brand of the company so that somebody looks at you and they just go, oh, she gets it. She's like a part of, like when I said about being in the family.
Yeah.
You know, and you could also liken it to be an actor. If you're up for a role of a bag lady, you know, the casting director wants to see you in that role. They want to hire you, but they
Mhm.
want to see you in the vision that they see. So if you walked out all Gucci-esque, they're not going to get that vision of who you are.
Right.
So just kind of keep that in the back of your minds too. It's like, who do I want to be in this company when I walk through the door?
Right. Next is identify your 4 to 5 most compelling stories featuring your skills. This is insanely important because throughout the questions, which we'll get into later in this presentation, is you're going to be asked to communicate a story or communicate a time when something happened, right? And it's important that you have those stories already prepared. So one, you know what this story is, but also what are the key points of that story that you're trying to pull out, and what are you trying to convey? And that's the conversation that you should be having with yourself before you step into an interview, because you want to make sure that the information and the stories that you're sharing make sense and are related to the the actual job that you're applying for. I can't tell you how many times that I've conducted an interview with an intern and they start sharing. I say, tell me a time when you had to work on a difficult project, and a story is shared with me that does not answer the question. Although engaging and entertained, it does not answer my question at all and doesn't let me know how they are a good fit for this job. So be very intentional about the stories and experiences that you share when you're in an interview. Another important thing too is initiate small talk. And I know that sometimes, specifically when you're interviewing a person, you come in, you're waiting in the lobby, you can be alone, you could be with another interview person. You're not really sure who you should talk to or what conversation you should conduct. You want to initiate small talk with not only who's greeting you, but also who you're interviewing with. It allows them to see a little glimpse of your personality that you might not be able to share in an interview format, because interviews are so just question and answer. You want to be able, engaging in small talk shows, how was your day? How did you get here? How long have you been working here? It builds that rapport so that it also lessens sort of, I won't say the awkwardness, but it lessens sort of that stiffness of interviewer to interviewee before you enter the room to interview. And then lastly, arrive early. So you always want to be, specifically those of you who are located in LA, you always want to be able to build in for traffic. But you want to be early because you never know what could happen. They might be able to take you earlier, but it also shows that you came prepared and were ready for this job. Before we move on to the virtual space, Deborah, I'm wondering, is there anything that you want to comment on in terms of preparing for the interview generally?
Yeah, DeMarco, I just wanted to touch base on the intimate small talk.
Yeah.
What's really helpful, you guys, is to go on LinkedIn.
Mm.
To find, if you know who you're interviewing with or the company you're interviewing with, go up and look at all the people. You may have been on a tennis team, right, at your college, and maybe that person was on a tennis team or enjoys tennis. You could say, I did a little looking and I see that you were on the tennis team at my college
Yeah.
at University of Irvine. That's so cool. Did you guys ever go to nationals?
Yeah.
Or your coach was this person? If they're a younger person, you never know what that connection is going to be. But that's where you start. Give a little look, see what they're about. And I can't tell you how much that people hire people on the spot, just knowing that, like, you went to the same school and you played tennis. It could be like that.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of small talk. Like, I saw you did tennis, or you were a rower. That's so funny. I was on the Charles too. Making it very connective in that way and
Yeah.
authentic to you.
Yeah. And it's also in a lot, I like that you bring up this, the idea of connection, Deborah, because
Yeah.
we know that specifically in the music industry, like, it's about who you know and not always about what you know. So the minute that you're able to build an instant connection when I'm going through resumes or I'm trying to make that final decision, I've already built a connection and rapport with someone, I think, oh, it's going to be so easy to work with this person. If they were on the tennis team at my college, I know what kind of person they were. I know that they know so-and-so and so-and-so. So you want to build that rapport and find a connection. And I know sometimes even when I was starting out, we were thinking like, oh, it's creepy to come in and know all this knowledge. Like, I don't want to do a research project on my interviews, but like, people appreciate it. Like, people are like, oh, it sort of validates their existence a little bit. Like, well, thank you for actually seeing that, like, and calling out, let's have a conversation about it.
Exactly right.
Virtually, you want to test your technology. We are in this space of Zoom, and I can't tell you how many times that Zoom has just failed us because, frankly, it just has an attitude problem. It doesn't like to cooperate. But you want to test your technology, and you want to, if they send a Zoom link, you want to test that Zoom link earlier than when your interview starts. You also want to make sure that your microphone and speaker are working correctly. What I like to do is I like to record a video of myself and then play it back so I can hear how I sound and how I look as well. You also want to set the scene and minimize distractions. I know that we see some people on here have virtual backgrounds. Some of you all don't, but I think everyone on this call right now has a background that sets the scene and it doesn't have distractions, because you don't, one thing, everyone's looking behind you, right? That is just, everyone says that they're not, but everyone is in your business looking behind you. So if you've got, you're conducting your interview at the kitchen table and you've got family walking back and forth, like we're seeing that and we're also distracted by it. So it's something that can sort of deduct points if not set up properly. So making sure that I know that all of us are working from home. So if you live with family, letting them know that, hey, I'm going to be in here conducting this interview, the door's going to be closed. So like minimizing distractions and noise. You also want to manage your body language. When we're in person, it's easy sort of to sit down and sit up straight or sort of read the room. And I know for me, I use my hands a lot, which doesn't happen because I'm now sitting in a chair in a virtual space. But even still, just sitting up straight, making eye contact directly to your camera, and even maybe talking with your hands or certain gestures shows that you're engaged in the conversation. And you don't want to be sort of like, yeah, cool, give me the job. Like, what are we doing here, right? You want to be present and you want to be strong. And this is the last point I'll make here is what Deborah was saying earlier is like, you want to conduct informational interviews with company employees. So you not only come in with a connection, but why I advise this too is it gives you an in to the interview. So if I'm on LinkedIn and I see that there was a coordinator recently hired for Music Forward, I'd reach out to them and say, hey, I see that you recently hired. I'm also in the process of hiring now as well. Can we talk about what your interview process would look like? Is there anything I should be looking out for? Or even sort of when I think about what questions I should prepare for my interviewers, I'd also ask for some of that insight too from someone who's previously interviewed. Deborah, anything to add here?
No, I think you're 100% correct. I was just working with a client who found out at this company that she went to school with somebody. So I said, reach out to them. And she goes, well, I don't know. They may not remember me.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, she went to 3 different high schools. So did this person. I go, I think if you went to 3 different high schools, she's actually going to remember you. And she did. And she was like, I see this person hiring.
Yeah.
And, you and I went to these high schools. She said, absolutely. That's the person that hired me. I will personally take your resume over.
Yes.
And that's something, with Gen Zs and your kind of group, it's like, I don't want to bother. I don't know. I'm letting you guys know, bother, go out, tell people who you are, bring your value to the front door.
Yeah. The worst thing that can happen is that you're ignored. And I know that we all have a secret fear of rejection, but like, then you move on and life moves on. And I as someone who like knows and is an advocate for life moving on, like, trust me, you won't remember it. They won't remember it in 2 weeks' time. If anything, it shows that you're persistent and that you're dedicated and that you're hungry for this job. And you're willing to go out of the box and go out of the norm to make it happen. Are there any questions on sort of preparing for the interview before I move on to sort of our next section? Awesome. Like, DeMarco, you're doing great. Great, guys. Thank you so much. So,
say something, DeMarco, actually about like the camera thing, you guys.
yeah.
I found just personally, it's almost like showtime. You gotta really project.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about Zoom, but I feel like, oh, I'm on set. Like, and I'm never on set, but you know what I mean? It's a different vibe than when you're with somebody. You really got to pull it through to the camera a little bit more, not like overdoing it, but definitely more like kind of what DeMarco said about it's a little bit more projection.
Yeah, that's 100% right. It's because, and I'll share a little story with you. I think we talked about this in our resume workshop too, is that I'm extremely extroverted, right? I mean, I like to be around people. Actually, I don't like to be around people, but like I can be around people and I can be energetic and I can be that connector. I'm one of those like introverted extroverts. So like after I do that, then I'm extremely exhausted. I need to like recuperate for like 3 days. But I'm someone who feeds off of energy. So if the room is live, I'm live, right? That doesn't happen in a resume, in a interview, right? Even now, as we're doing this presentation, like the reason why I ask for you all to have your cameras on and to engage in questions is because that energy fuels me to sort of give you this level of energy. So I think you have to what Deborah's saying, bring it a little more because you're not feeding off that energy. You're not really being able to read them as well because you're not in front of their face. So you always want to, one, bring that energy, but also ask engaging questions that allow them to show their personality just as much as you're trying to show yours too. Okay. Interview questions. So I know that we're going to spend the bulk of today's presentation on this because it's the crucial part of the interview. There are really 2 types of interview questions that are asked really in a standard interview. There's situational / behavioral. So these type of questions describe your behaviors. It explains your actions and paints a picture for the interviewer, right? So it's what would you do if you had $1 million? Or if we were to do this, how would you react, right? They want to know who you are as a person, and that's the type of questions that allow them to glean that. The second are the open-ended questions, right? Why do you want this job? What are your strengths? Tell me about yourself. These are the questions where you can go in so many directions, and I'm here to sort of point you in the right one when it comes to answering these questions. But when it comes to standard interview questions, it's really broken down into 4 crucial parts. And you think about it as your resume. That's really what an interview is. An interview is, I want to say it's like defending a dissertation. It's like you presented your resume. Here are the facts, right? And now the interview is really for you to say, tell more about it and really defend where you got that work and expand on it. So breaking it down into 4 sections, just as a resume, we're going to ask questions about who you are as a person, right? Tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? What kind of work interests you? How do you describe your communication skills? These are all questions that are about you as a person, and they're being asked because we want to see how well, not only are you a good fit for this organization or company, but how well do you fit in with the rest of the team that's already here? That's a huge part of the interview that I don't think everyone shares, is that typically it happens in the second interview. The first interview really is, I'm trying to see skills-wise if you qualify for this job, right? The second interview really is, I want to see if you're a good fit for the team that's already here. Now, when applying for an internship, typically it's only one interview, so they're trying to figure that all out in one interview. So you want to be intentional and strategic in how you're answering some of these questions, and we'll talk about those strategies in a couple of slides. The second bulk is really the company, the position. I'm going to ask you questions about why specifically are you interested in this job? What can you bring to this organization? How do your professional goals align with this mission statement? And I loved how, Chloe, you sort of did that in your pitch to us when you introduced yourself, was this is what I'm studying, but it's not related to anything I want to do. Here's what I actually want to do in the music industry. So, and communicating that, because it's tricky for someone like yourself, Chloe, who has to communicate. This is what I studied in college, but my experience shows that I want to be in the music industry. So really addressing that up front is absolutely brilliant. The third bucket really is education and skills. So how would you describe your communication skills? Again, how do you describe your computer and tech skills? A piece of advice, this goes back to sort of the resume, is everyone is skilled at Microsoft, right? That's sort of a given right now, right? If you're not, it'd be surprising. But majority of people who are applying for internships jobs, like, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You should at least know the basics. So when communicating your tech skills, you want to be specific in terms of what you actually know. If you're proficient in Excel, I know formulas that can do this, this, and that, right? If you're proficient in PowerPoint or InDesign or Photoshop, you want to talk about your skill level versus like, yeah, I know it. Like, we all know it, right? I know PowerPoint. We're looking at a PowerPoint right now. I put this together. But like, what are my actual skills? What can I do in using this platform? We'll ask about your leadership experience, and as well as situations where you've been able to teach someone something, right? This is me getting a better insight of how you spent your educational years, right? It's nothing that for those who went to college and pursued that pathway, you went to college and that's great. What did you do though while you were obtaining that education? Everyone's required to go to class, right? We're paying for it. What did you do to go above and beyond? And that's what I'm trying to suss out when asking you questions specific to your education. And then lastly is your work experience, right? The most important part. I want you to provide an example of when you worked with a group as a team. Provide an example of when you solved a problem. I'm really trying to understand how you work in this professional environment and how you work with the team that I already have. Did you ever quit a job or a project, and why? Talk about your accomplishments. And we're going to unpack a lot of these questions in the slides coming up. But before we move on, Deborah, I've gone through a lot here in terms of the standard interview questions. Curious if you ever got anything to add.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As I always do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so here's the deal, guys. When you are doing your resume, look at it kind of like again, I'm going back to this acting analogy. I don't know why, but it's just what's coming up for me. So I'm going with it. But it's sort of like if you got a script, right? And it says person talks here. You are saying this, you are saying that, you're describing this. But then when you go in for the interview, it's like you're coming alive telling the story of that character. And so again, kind of DeMarco touched on this earlier on. It's all about the stories regarding this. It's not about ambiguity. For example, can I give that example, DeMarco?
Yeah, please do.
For example, I was doing this with this girl. Tell me a little bit about your strength or your weakness. So she's like, I'm really good at team building and I enjoy working with people. You know, I mean, it's like the standard, right? I'm really organized and whatever. No. So then I just felt like there was something in her backstory. I go, what about when you were young? She goes, well, there was a time when I was 5 and all this, my mom opened up my Dora backpack and all this money fell out of it. She thought like I was a drug dealer or something. I don't think her mother thought she was a drug dealer at 5, but you know where I'm going with that. And so she had to fess up that she wanted to buy lunch at the, at the cafeteria, but her mom would never let her buy lunch at the cafeteria. Her mom would make her salami sandwiches. She had an idea that she sold each piece. Her mom put 4 slices in, each slice for $5. She had people lining up to buy the salami and she would act it out. She'd go, oh, the salami, oh my God, they don't have it here at the cafeteria, but if you had what I was having. And she's in an interview, okay? And she's explaining to somebody who wants to be in sales or marketing or whatever. And she said, and they would line up and they would give me like $5. Well, excuse me, but that sold volumes of who she was for sales, for marketing, for PR, for everything. And it comes alive and somebody can relate to that. I mean, you bring that kind of story, I can guarantee you other people who are interviewing did not have a story like that. It also helps you keep on track because sometimes you get people very distracted. The secretary comes in or like DeMarco said, somebody's bothering them in the background. But if they go, okay, I'm sorry, Chloe, what were you saying? And you go, oh my God, they hate me. He's so not interested in what I'm saying. You could go, I'm so glad you asked that. My strength was, well, when I was 12, I had 10,000 followers because I did this, this, and this. And in your mind, you've just got those 4 or 5 stories. It doesn't matter where the person takes you, you're back there. And then they're thinking, wow, that didn't rattle them. Wow, now they kept me on track. Good for her.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Deborah. And this leads us right into, we're going to break down further sort of these different buckets of questions. Show of hands, has anyone heard of the STAR method to answering interview questions? Yeah. Oh, cool. Great. It's not a good. So we're going to be using that method to answer questions. And it's sort of what Deborah was just alluding to right now is when using the STAR method situation, you want to talk about the situation, right? Yeah. You want to focus on the actual task in which you conducted. What was the action, right? What was that task? What did you do with it? And how did you execute it? And then what was the result, right? Because of doing this task and because of the action, this is what I was able to achieve. And so that thinking about the situation, the task, the action, the result when answering your questions will help you, to Deborah's point, stay really concise and direct and not be rattled when being asked questions that you necessarily weren't prepared for. When thinking about the personal questions, an example being, tell me about yourself. I know Deborah shared this story with us. The interview is looking for communication skills and clear thinking about your recent history. And to Deborah's point, this is a space where you can share a meaningful story. What we want to encourage you here is that make sure that the stories that you are sharing are not only concise and direct, but they're related to the job and the job skills, right? Each story I should be able to pull out, wow, from that story, she was able to, again, handle this situation, right? Execute this task and provide these actions to complete that task and was able to get this result, right? When you're talking about what is your biggest strength, right? We always get this question, what is your biggest strength and what is your biggest weakness? And there's so many ways to answer that question. I think also interviewers have gotten crafty at asking it. I don't know if anyone's really asking, all right, what is your biggest strength? Now we hear like, tell me about a time where you didn't succeed on a project and how did you cope with that? Like we're seeing it sort of in these sharing a story versus answering the question directly. But what is your biggest strength? So going into the interview, you want to know your top 2 or 3 strengths and be prepared to discuss each with an example, right? So if I were to share my strengths, I'd say one of my strengths is strategic partnership, right? And so I've shared it. I've shared the strength, and I see that this has been a strength of mine for a while now because I'm really good at creating meaningful relationships with external constituents for our organization. There have been an ample amount of times at my last job, Music Forward, where I had to connect with partners such as Columbia University, USC, UCLA, where I had to really create a strategic plan for us to engage with each other. And because I was able to bring together that strategic partnership, we were able to increase our participants between the ages of 18 and 22 by over 50%, right? So here's the situation I was in. Here's a task I did to complete it. My action was I was able to create meaningful relationships with the different partners. And then because of that, my result was that I was to increase our participation over 50%. And then another example I'll give to you all too is, what would you do if you won the lottery? So before we go into this, I want to know if there's any questions around the tell me about yourself or what is your biggest strength question that's always asked in an interview.
I have a question, if
Yeah, go
that's
ahead,
okay.
Liz. Yeah.
So when they're asking the part about tell me about yourself and you share that meaningful story, do you also have to share that information ahead of time about like where you're from and what school you go to and that information about like your graduation and those things, or do you not have to explain all that?
In my experience, typically you don't have to explain that because it's on your resume, right? So this is a great question too, because essentially what you're asking is like, how much information do you share when they ask you to tell me about yourself? Deborah, what do you say to that question?
No, absolutely not. That is really about, unless you did something incredible while I was attending. Where do you go again, Marissa?
I go to
UCLA.
UCLA.
Yeah. Oh, I got that right. Ooh. So proud of myself. While I was at UCLA, you could say something. I started a side hustle of where I created bands across when people came out, the fun thing or whatever it is. If it relates to kind of what DeMarco's saying, if it's relating to the field and you started something there, then go for it. But to say, well, I go to UCLA and I'm graduating that, no, that's not the time for that. It is what strength, what is about yourself. I come from this. I've been you could say something like I'm attending, but this is what I've been doing. This is my background. This is my
Right.
story.
Right. And typically they'll ask those questions directly, but again, it's on your resume. So when there's always this open-ended question about what would you do if you won the lottery, and sometimes these questions are sometimes these questions are asked in a different way. So what would you do if you won the lottery? What would you do if you got free tickets to this concert? What would you do if your house burned down? These questions seem unrelated to the job, but they actually are very related. Yeah. What the interviewer is trying to do is assess your priorities. So the way that you answer, if you won the lottery, shows what you prioritize and what's important to your life. So saying an example, what would you do if you won the lottery? And I say, I would quit my job and I would move to New Zealand and I'd live remotely and not talk to anybody. Great. Well, I'm not going to hire you because if you win it while you're working here, I don't have an employee, right? So what is the best way to answer this? If I won the lottery right now, it'd be very overwhelming for me, right? And I'd have to figure out, and you sort of could address it. I have to figure out what my priorities were. I'd love to work. I'd love to be in the music industry, so I definitely want to continue that. I definitely would use some of the money to support my parents back at home. And then to Marissa's point, you can go back to tell me about myself. I grew up very poor back in Chicago, so I would love for my family to have that money while I'm here in California pursuing my dream of being X, Y, and Z, right? So they're really trying to get a sense of not only your priorities, but a little bit of your morals and values too. And do those connect to our mission statement and our own company's morals and values? So that's why it's important to, when you're preparing for the interview, to know what's important to that company. What is their mission? Deborah, any other tactics in answering this type of question?
Absolutely. I have a great little thing about that. I was working with a kid who wanted to be a CPA, and he was a tennis guy, but he had Tourette's. And so it was going to be very interesting for him to speak to clients and things like that. But being a tennis person, I had suggested to him, why don't you start a club at school called account for something.
Yeah.
What he did, he went to local banks and local accounting firms and raised $10,000 with his tennis team for Tourette's. And as I said, it was called account for something. If I tell you guys that on his resume, when he wrote that, or when they asked about a question like this, and he said that he did, he was hired literally on the spot by all the top 4 accounting firms because they want to bring that into their company.
Yeah.
It didn't matter about his GPA, where he went to school. It was to Bryant University up in Rhode Island. It was that kind of commitment, and that he didn't see himself as a victim, and you know, that he wants to bring that value into the company because it's a value that he upholds. Companies today want to see your value system. They want to see what value you as a person are bringing and what kind of community, what you bring to the community at large. Could be at school, like Marissa, what you're saying. Maybe it's a sorority that you belong to. And I had a kid who raised money for Fuck Cancer, it's called. Well, who's the guy who did Taylor Swift, the producer for Taylor Swift?
Oh, Scooter Braun?
Scooter Braun's wife started Fuck Cancer. So when she interviewed with Scooter Braun, hello, there's the connection. Well, at my sorority, University of Syracuse, I raised whatever for Fuck Cancer. I know that happens to be your wife's thing. I didn't know it at the time, but I'm really proud to have been a part of it. Done.
Connected. And I think something also to note too is specifically in the music industry, but I think what's happening in a lot of different spaces, diversity and inclusion are at the top of everyone's agenda right now. Right? It is just the reality with the unfortunate events that are happening in our world. Everyone has now decided that diversity and inclusion is important. But it's anytime you can weave how that is important to you throughout any of these questions, I think it puts you at the top of anyone's radar. So just keep that in mind as you're preparing for these different interviews. We talk about company and position. One question that is related to this is how do your professional goals align with our mission statement? We talked a little bit about this earlier, but the interview is really looking to see how closely your professional goals align with the company while also predicting longevity, right? I want to know what your professional goals are, because if you tell me, well, in 2 years, I want to be the CEO of a company, and you come in and you're 23 without any experience, I know this is not the position for you. You're going to be expecting a lot from this that I can't provide for you. And you're not focused on where you should be right now. So it's really about not only do your goals align with our company, but like, what is the longevity? How long can I count on you to be a part of this company? Because to hire an employee is extremely expensive. I don't know if anyone talks about it, but it's really expensive to hire someone new. You have to, put money into looking for the person, put money into interviewing. I have to pay my staff to then interview new candidates. Then not only that, then benefits, right? I have to then create a new salary and provide benefits for that person. So it's a huge bulk of my budget line. So I need to know that all this money that I'm investing in you as an employee is not going to go to waste after a year. We do know that typically, the generation that we serve is 2 years is a really a minimum maximum that people are staying into jobs and roles, which is totally fine, but you don't want to commit. They know that, but you don't want to say that in the interview. And then Marissa, I'm going to read your comment out loud if that's okay. It says you're worried about that because it would be 10 times more expensive to pay for you because you're international, and they would have to pay for your visa sponsorship. Same thing with you, Sariel. So Deborah, have you ever had these conversations or been in a space where you've hired international students or know companies who have had to?
Yeah, I have to be honest with you, it's a little tricky now.
Yeah.
In the good old days, or whatever those were, they wanted international students. They could pay for visa. They had the money to do that and all of that. Now it's a little trickier, to be honest with you. Although I will tell you guys, actually, as I say that, I lie. Well, I don't lie, but there's a new company that I just found called Intern Group, by the way. And it's this really cool thing. I think that they have jobs internationally, like London. I'd have to go in my file right now, but like London, they have jobs in London, Barcelona, whatever. So maybe if you're there, like, you or if you're there, like in Europe somewhere, that might be a great way to go, because you're there, you know, and it's really incredible. It's called the intern group. Look it up. It just came up on my feed and I was like, wow, somebody came up with a really smart idea.
Yeah. Thank you for
I mean,
sharing
it's
that.
not something, I'll be honest with you. It's kind of like it kind of took the headhunter model where in the old days, you know, you pay like $8,000 and somebody goes, I'm going to get you the like job of your dreams. It's obviously much less than that, but it's a way of where you guys are to maybe get into. They know the companies that are there. So FYI on that.
Perfect. Thank you for that resource, Deborah.
Yeah, no, it just came up. You're welcome.
So, all right. So continuing on to sort of those buckets of questions, education and skills. So tell me about a leadership experience that you've had, right? The interview is looking to see if you engage in activities outside of your required classwork. So I know that being a president of this club or being a secretary or treasurer, or even if you worked off campus or volunteered on campus, not enough people talk about their volunteer experience. Volunteering is just a job that you didn't get paid for. It's still a job, right? You still had to come in at a certain time. You still had a task that were assigned to you. And if you didn't do it right, you'd be let go. So volunteering is just a job that you don't get paid for. So it's important to communicate that not only on your resume, but also when you're in our interview space. Also, what is your greatest weakness? The interviewer is looking to see how self-aware you are of your professional abilities. So again, in interviewing, I'm not looking for you to sort of beat yourself down or share a weakness so I can sort of read you out. I'm looking to see, one is how self-aware are you? Because I think it's very important to be self-aware, specifically in the music industry, because there's so many people that are just walking around with a BS meter. I think everyone in the industry can smell bullshit because it's just what we are trained to do. But also I want to know, in terms of what trainings will you need in order to be able to accomplish this job? And do I have the proper tools to be able to invest that training in you? That's also what I'm trying to assess out as the interviewer. Because your weakness could also complement, I think even me as someone who leads a team and is hiring interns, like I think Zainab, who's on the call, is also our program intern and who I manage, and I'll share a little something around that, is that when I was interviewing Zainab specifically, when I had asked her about weaknesses and strengths, I'm always looking for someone who can complement my strengths and weaknesses, because that is what builds a partnership. And I think, and Zainab, don't correct me if I'm wrong, but if I think that our strengths and weaknesses complement each other, and that's why we're able to make such a great team. I'm not the most organized person. Zainab is very organized. So it allows us to work together. So sometimes interviewers are looking for employees to supplement their weaknesses too, so that we can work more efficiently. Deborah, what do you say here?
I say exactly.
Yeah.
I say that also what I coach kids on to is, if you talk about your weakness, like you're a perfectionist.
Yeah.
So I'm a perfectionist and I just, Cyril, she's smiling.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure a lot of, you know, these are just standard things that everybody feels, right? Like, you know, I'm a perfectionist. So sometimes I don't get things done because I'm just working on that one project till, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning. But you could talk it again as a story form. You know, I just know growing up or in college, this is the way I was. And I learned about myself that way, that really wasn't the best way to be. So I've incorporated some other tools that have helped me move through that. I still think I'm really good. Being a perfectionist has really helped me in this A, B, and C area.
Yeah.
But I'm aware now how that hindered me. And I took the initiative to move that forward.
Also addressing, like, how can this company help you turn that weakness into a strength? Something that attracted me to this organization is that I know that in this specific role that I'll be challenged on what I see as a weakness. And I'm excited about that, right? So talk about how this position will help you turn that weakness into a strength. In regards to work experience, something, this is specific really to how we've transitioned to the remote space, but something I'm asking interviewees right now are, how do you keep yourself motivated? And what I'm trying to glean from this conversation is, with most positions being remote, the interviewers want to know, how do you keep focused in working remote and working alone, right? previously I'm able to come out of the office and check on my team and see what you all are doing. That's not the luxury in this remote space. You can't really micromanage in this remote space. Not that anyone should be micromanaging, but you want to be able to answer that question about how you keep yourself motivated. And really something that answers this question is, how do you organize? Right? Do you use a planner? Do you use a calendar? How do you manage your time? How do you take breaks? What keeps you focused online? Something I'd say to this is, I keep myself motivated by engaging with my team members via chat throughout the day. I also make sure that I allot time for work, and I schedule my meetings is just as well as I schedule specific times for me to do my work too. And I also take small 15-minute breaks throughout the day just to keep my eyesight well. So just taking them through your day so they get a better understanding of how and grow that trust that they're looking to build. Lastly, here is describe your most significant accomplishment. Excuse me. The interviewer is looking to see how you define success. This is extremely important because they want to see, one, does it align with them as a manager, but also does it align with the company or organization as a whole. You don't have to confine your discussion to only work-related accomplishments either. I know there are a lot of accomplishments. Getting into college could be an accomplishment if we talk about being first generation, right? We can talk about, even as we have international students on this call today, being able to work in the States or go to school in the States. What was that process like? What was that accomplishment like? So letting them know that, like, this is how I'm defining success and this is how I'm going to define it in my work. Deborah, anything to add here?
Oh, absolutely. This is where, you guys, the story gets good.
Yeah.
Do you know, it really is. I have so many stories I could tell you, but when this comes to this too, don't define yourself just by school. You know, it is the 4 years, it's the community outreach, it's all your accomplishments. It could be something from your background. You know, I recently worked with a kid, I'll be honest with you. And during this time, his father happens to be like with the Miami Heat. I think he's like a doctor or whatever with him. But so he's kind of grown up in that family. So during this time, he was like, I'm not doing anything. They're not doing anything. I'm gonna see if I can interview him. So he took IGTV, you know, Instagram TV, and he's like, hey, Dwayne Wade, could I interview you? Because how cool is it? We only get to speak to these guys when they're coming off the court or going on the court. This was like in the height of COVID. So he started to just do an IG live TV with them. And now he's in production for a reality show. Okay? Because I got him with somebody from William Morris. But just an idea that you might have had that say, you know what, while I'm sitting here, I could be doing this.
Yeah.
That also, bringing that into a company is huge. Your side hustle in this land of COVID, I've always said to Marco, it's your time to thincubate.
Yeah.
It really does, you know, you're not on Instagram looking, oh, they're having so much fun at U of F. Their sorority looks so much better. That's gone. Everybody's doing, it leveled the playing field. But what it doesn't level is your ingenuity, What do you love to do? You guys all talked about music. Why not find out musicians at your school that haven't been able to play and get it in your dorm room and do an IGTV or Facebook Live thing? There's so much creativity, you guys, in music. If you just did a little side hustle and you brought that to an interview with DeMarco, what would you think of somebody like that?
I would think that you're amazing, and it's a space that I would think as an organization haven't tapped into. So if you've already tapped into it, gained a following, and want to just sort of slap our brand on it, and we can help you there, like that is a win-win. I also think too, Deborah, it's something that you and I talk about. I realize that we're cutting it close to 1 o'clock, so I'm going to speed through the rest of the presentation. But everyone's going to ask what you did during the pandemic. Everyone is going to ask. I'm curious, what have you done in all this downtime, right? So I know there are people out there who are doing certificates and going to online schools and doing it that way, but though everyone is sort of has been sparked with this entrepreneur spirit that it can only, and specifically in the music industry, can only help you. The last thing I want to touch on today's presentation is after the interview. So you want to clarify next steps and timeline with your interviewers. It's extremely important. A secret that I'll tell you all is that I know that when you're applying for an interview, sometimes you never hear back. I truly wish that we can get into a point where everyone is provided feedback based on their interview, if they make it to a final interview, because I think it's important. How else are you going to learn? But also, if you haven't been contacted in the time frame that they've said, it means that they're still in the process of hiring. So businesses and companies don't typically send out decline letters until they filled the position. So keep that in mind. So if you follow up and don't hear anything, follow up again. I'd say give a strong follow up for about a month, and then if you don't hear anything, then it's sort of like, let's move on. But something to know is you're not really going to get a "we're not interested" letter until the position has been filled and the person has signed their offer letter. So that's something to note too. Send a prompt thank you letter or an email on the same day. I pulled in an example right here, but just to go over it briefly, what you want to do is really just thank them for interviewing for the position that you interviewed for. You want to bring out some of the key talking points that you all discussed. If there was a funny moment or something that you learned or a story that you enjoyed sharing, put that point in there, right? Anytime you can make a personal connection with them, you want to be able to do it. You want to note the names of the interviewers in your letter too, to make sure that they're thanking everyone. And then also you want to lastly follow up if you haven't heard from the employer in a time period specified. That goes to my point earlier. I did have a space for us to practice some of this. I know we're getting close to a lot of you have class, so I'm going to skip that part now, but I want to give you all an opportunity to just ask any questions specifically to Deborah on her experience and what you all should be doing as you're interviewing. So I'll open the floor for you all.
Yes, please do. Also, I just wanted to make a point about, and maybe you guys can tap in here, but with the thank you note, being a publicist and a marketing person for over 30 years, my job, which is kind of like going to be your job, would be, I had to call all these, like the Today Show and Good Morning America and all these kinds of shows. And you get the producer on the line and she'd go, yeah, Deborah. And I go, oh, I have a pitch to tell you. Okay, I have 30 seconds,
Yeah.
And you'd like tell the story. Okay, I'll talk to my producers. I'll get back to you. And then I would call back again, and they'd go, yeah. And I always had to bring something else. Well, did you see today that COVID's gone up, 20,000%? This person's doing this vaccine. I really think you should speak to them now. And you just keep bringing new information in. Same with that letter. You can call another week. Just say, I'm just checking in. By the way, I just met so-and-so. I understand you went to school with them, or,
Yeah.
A little letter. They spoke so highly about you. And I just said, I interviewed with you. Never know. And, I would always they said very nicely, instead of you're a pain in the whatever, thank you for being so tenacious. Thank you for being this. People really appreciated that I was not going to give up. I was just going to keep bringing more information till I got my client on the show. And that's how you guys got to look at it. Do you know that you can write if you bring some new information to the table?
Yeah, Chloe has a question. I know she had to hop off, but no, she's right there. Question on how do you follow up when it's a recruiting email that gets a lot of emails?
Oh, like Indeed and all of that kind of stuff, and Glassdoor.
Yeah,
Is that what you're referring to?
like specifically talking to a recruiter.
Oh, guys, that's hard. I got to be honest with you. It's just hard. It's kind of almost virtually impossible in my book, to be honest with you, through those Indeeds and Glassdoors and all that. LinkedIn, you got like a better chance of that kind of recruiting thing and connecting with them. But the rest is such a crapshoot. That's why I say, if you can connect with people through LinkedIn, through connections, and say, so like, dear DeMarco, I know this person. I was wondering if I could have a chance to speak with you. We didn't even get into the whole LinkedIn informational interviews. That really is so important for all of you guys right now, is to just say, hey, I'm interviewing for this job at Live Nation. I see that you worked there, or you're this. Would you mind 10 minutes that I could speak to you, as I really am looking forward to being a part of the community? Something to that effect. In addition, there's communities, guys. There's Next Gen HQ. Write this down right now. This is your constituencies. And on there, they're always looking for jobs. You've got to be a part of the club. It's like, you've got to be part of a club that people don't want you in. When you're part of a club, people are going to hire people within the club. So if you say, I'm part of Next Gen and I saw that you're interviewing, boom, you got a leg up. Like I said before, it's all who you know. it's very hard from a recruiter standpoint, I hate to say it, to make an inroad if you don't know that person or you don't know somebody who knows that person. And I got to be honest with you, because your morale and keeping up your energies and all that, right now, all of that, I wouldn't suggest applying to things in Indeed and Glassdoor and all that. I try to do it more through your college. Like I know Handshake, like through Live Nation or through House of Blues, that kind of thing. You've got a better shot. Did that answer the question?
I believe so. I also think that something to know too, we talked about this a bit in our resume workshop for those who were there, but like the music industry specifically is taking a hit, specifically around live performance, right? So being able to connect directly with a person on LinkedIn versus going through sort of Indeed or Glassdoor, we know that some of those postings have been old and haven't been updated because there's no one working behind the scenes anymore. So really looking at LinkedIn and those postings or directly on the company's website is the way to go. We have time for one or two more questions if there are any.
You know what, guys? Your job right now, in my book, would be to network and to connect. That right now, it's almost like the first step to the resume, to the interviewing process. How many people make it your job? I'm going to connect with 10 people this week. And then this is what I do with my students. And then, you write down like an Excel sheet. What are the next steps? Connected with them. Told me to call back next Tuesday. And you just cast that net out to 100 people. It's a numbers game. You cast out to 100 people, you're going to get 5 responses. Then all you need is the one job.
Right. Cool. Thank you. Well, I don't want to keep you all here for too long. And thank you all so much for attending our office hour today. I really hope that it helped you all out. If it didn't, just be really awkward. But I feel like we talked about those of you who were in the resume workshop, and then again met with Laura Rodriguez. I know a lot of you are interested in the marketing, branding space of the music industry. So as we continue to build out office hours, I'll make sure to bring in more professionals to be able to help you guide in that pathway. But thank you all so much. Deborah, thank you so much for being here today and providing your insight to our future industry leaders. Lastly, I'm going to send you all a survey, and I know those of you filled it out during the resume workshop, but I'm currently planning for spring 2021. And so all your feedback is very necessary. But what I'm looking to do is build more of this cohort model in the spring, and then also go through 4 weeks of it together. And then what I'll do is we'll build your resume and attach it to a resume book, an official resume book that companies will look at directly, so that, again, you guys aren't going out there and having to search for yourselves. So we're still working on some of that, but I would love to have some of you or all of you to be a part of it. So stay tuned for some of that information. And you guys, can I just say something to Marco? Yeah. If you guys just have like more questions, and I know we kind of rushed through it because I am part of this family, that if you guys want to reach out to me, I do complimentary half-hour like little consults. Yeah. So you could write to info at yourcareerdesignlab.com. Mm-hmm. So if you have a specific question, like, I don't know how to read this or how to say this, or I'm up for an interview or whatever, we could just flesh it out a little bit, maybe just get a nugget of a story or whatever you guys might want to talk about. I'd be happy to set that up with you. Yeah, and I want to vouch for Deborah. I don't need to, but Deborah's really good at sort of taking your story and connecting it to where you want to be. And so really sussing out, well, what is it you really want? And what are you really trying to accomplish here? And I know being in college is often daunting, where you feel like you're being pulled in so many directions. You want to experience everything. But internships and networking access are important. And it's not always a criteria to your first internship, your first job, to be exactly where you want to be, but you want to make sure that's a stepping stone to where you go. You want to begin with the end in mind is what I try to live by. So with that said, thank you all so much for being here. Deborah, thank you for being here. And until next week, you all have a great weekend and enjoy the weather. Oh yeah. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.